Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian online seminar group. First, then if you have any question, you can ask our speaker during his presentation or after his presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming dear Professor Edward Lee. Edward Lee is Adjunct Associate Professor at Columbia Business School and an Associate Professor of Accounting and Area Coordinator for Ph.D. program at the City University of New York. His research interests including financial market regulations and enforcement, equity analysis, and corporate disclosures. He has published papers in top-ranking journals, including the Accounting Review, Journal of Accounting Research, Journal of Accounting and Economics, and Management Science. Now we will start our seminar with the Professor Edward Lee.
Okay, thank you. Let me just pull up my slides here. Just one second. Okay, can everyone see my slides? Okay, perfect. First, I want to thank Mohammed and also the Egyptian Online Seminar Series for inviting me. And it's a great honor and a pleasure today here to share my research with friends and colleagues all over the world. This is collaborative work with my brilliant co-authors. Jiren Tu, he's currently assistant professor at the Southwest University of Finance and Economics in China. And also my brilliant finance colleagues here, also with me at Peril College, Dexing Zhou. First, I should say this is not a completely new paper. We actually finished this first draft last year, like June 2023. But in the last few months, we have undergone a significant change, and some of the really new and exciting analysis. This is something I really want to share with you, and also welcome any comments and suggestions. So please feel free to jump in and just ask questions, interrupt me, whatever, as like this is in a regular workshop. So really looking forward to your comments. And this paper, the title is A Promise and the Peril of Generative AIs. First, I want to talk about a little bit about the generative AI. If you think about the most current version, like the modern day generative AI, all started from the famous Vaswani paper et al. The 2017, the attention is all you need. And after the group introduced this brilliant idea, then OpenAI started their first GPT-1 products, finished in 2018. And a year later, the second version, and a year later, there's a third version. Then this comes to ChatGPT in the 2022, which is most of us start to get familiar with. And then last year, they introduced this new model, the ChatGPT, the GPT-4, which kind of like sparks some of people will say, oh, this may be some AGI here, the artificial general intelligence. And during each of this iteration, like the advance of the models, and you can see there's a huge human input in that because, they have to learn huge amount of voluminous amount of human generated corpus. And also in the fine tuning, they have to also have human inputs and interactions with them. So you can see the GPT and all this kind of large language model really learn from humans, okay? Which kind of like reminds me, one of my recent paper got published. This is a paper I unfortunately to get published in year 2023, which is a paper about the Federal Reserve. Okay? In that paper, my co-author and I, my co-authors, including Cairo, Min Shen, and also Joanna Wu, Gary Lang, we talk about how this we talk about this Federal Reserve. They look at the SEC filings. Like, for example, the Federal Reserve staff can look up the 10K, 10Q of IBM. They can look at Google or JP Morgan Chase, and they try to learn from firms' 10K, 10Qs, and they try to, based on this granular information, to build their GDP forecast. And in that paper, we actually find that Federal Reserve are superior than the general professional forecaster just because they have this unique source of information. And we finished that paper in 2017, then submitted to a couple of top journals, and unfortunately just got bumped off in first round or second round. Then we submitted to Accounting Review in 2021. Fortunately, we had a brilliant editor, which is Dan Taylor, and also we had two brilliant anonymous referees in that. So after the first round, we have the second round revision in 2022, and we're fortunate to have it published in 2023. The thing is, I want to say that during this process, the editors and referee, they have a huge input in our project because we literally learned from their prospects. And now you can see the final in-print version have their fingerprints everywhere. So to some extent, I feel like it's a little bit, I would say this is unfair that only the co-author like us, we got the fame, we got the credit, but not the anonymous referees, because to some extent, some of their intellectual input are almost equivalent to the co-authors. So the analogy here is that in developing something, GDP or like working papers, you really have a lot of input from the other side. So you have to learn from this. And I don't know how many of you watched this movie before? Yep, the artificial intelligence movie. I know some of you watched this before, but for those of you who have not, I strongly recommend you just watch this. It's a brilliant movie. This little boy named David. He's not a human boy. He's actually a prototype of artificial intelligent robot. So there's a couple who lost their only son to a rare disease. So they adopted this artificial intelligent robot as their surrogates. The thing is, the movie is not about how brilliant this new technology or this boy is. The movie, its touching part is that David's really learned from their human parents and human friends, not only starting from learning how to eat, how to sleep, how to play, but more importantly, they learn from humans' emotion. He learns why people get angry, why people get happy, why people get jealous, and most of all, why people, they have this or that kind of like, interaction in humans. So he's an AI, he's really learned from a human. Given that perspective, if we talk about the large language model, the LLMs, and you can find that the modern day LLMs are primarily based on this transformer architecture. As I said, the breakthrough is come from the Vaswani at our 2017 paper. At the core of that paper is this, they call the self-attention mechanism. In this mechanism, as you can see from the little illustration on the left-hand side, they try to predict what's the next word. Like we start from the word embedding, like it takes great courage to let. What will be the next word? So the transformer is with mass attention, they're going to link all the token and words together to try to find what's the most fitting one. And through some iterations, it's going to get to the prediction. And the prediction is quite intuitive. It's like this. They almost have a dictionary here. They start from A, next with the artwork, abacus, and end it with 0 and zeta. They try to predict. It takes great courage to let yourself, and they find that you'll serve probably the best next words with the highest probability. So that's how they generate, and that's named the generative AI coming from. And of course, as I just already mentioned, this GPT series are pre-trained with a text word prediction from large corpus from internet. And for any specific functions, models are also fine-tuned with human inputs. Then any human feedbacks and reinforcement learning are used further to align a model with what the producer tried to get them to work. Okay. And after OpenAI released their model, and we can see there's a huge impact. And many people call this a disruptive technology. because many areas now start to adopt and embrace this new technology. First of all, in computer science, the coding, now we know that you don't necessarily have to write those fun, just some of the preliminary model and also the code by yourself. You can just give instructions, and the AI tools can help you accomplish many of those coding tasks. Customer service. Nowadays, whenever you chat online with a company's customer service, and most likely you're actually chatting with the AI, not chatting with the real human. Healthcare, of course, this is another important part being impacted by the generated products. And education. And at the end of the day, this is what we focus is our finance and accounting and economics, because we know in finance and accounting, a huge amount of our data is in the form of text and the numbers. So that is actually the primary format of communication. And we believe that's something the generative AI products is going to have a huge impact. And we can see that, not unsurprising, many of our colleagues and started to work on this area. So there's a current research. Of course, this part, I can't be exhaustive. I just name a few that I would say it's getting prominence. First of line of research of the Spurgeon literature is about extract and analyze and generate information. Like, for example, the famous Lopez and Lera in the TAM paper try to decipher the news headlines and try to predict what the stock price is going to move, which direction. Then there's a Blanksport et al. 2024 paper, try to identify in firms' financial disclosure, what percentage are actually AI-generated content. Then Wu et al. Paper kind of try to assess, using the GPT products, try to assess the loan default risk and to show that GPT is actually quite useful, provide a lot of unique insight, and then like a human assessor. Then there's a Kim et al. Paper, the 2024A here, the famous bloated paper, try to summarize the financial disclosure into a more meaningful and readable and concise way. This is the first line of research. Then, of course, there's another line of research, try to compare the large language models' performance to human. Chen et al. 2023, try to compare GPT with human data analyst. Notice that this is not necessarily a financial analyst, this is a data analyst. So they have some kind of standardized data analytical work. For example, like textual to SQL conversion, graph summarization. These are the things people use a lot in this data analysis kind of calibrating task. They find GPT can replace data analysts. That's their conclusion. And then there's a new paper, the Min et al. 2024. They look at how GPT can analyze conference calls using a sample from 2015 to 2023. And their conclusion is GPT can actually replicate the analyst work. And another paper by Kim et al. Group, 2024B, they look at the GPT in predicting the directional change of earnings based on pure quantitative information like financial statements, based on a sample from 1968 to 2021. So what they do is they try to feed the GPT with financial statements, balance sheet, income statements, and extra, and they ask them to predict how this earnings is going to change. Like it's going to go up or it's going to go down. And they find that GPT can actually outperform analysts, sound and square, okay, which is very impressive. Okay. With this research, and I would say so far, most of work, they're exciting, but they're focused most like on showcasing the GPT's capacity. They want to show how brilliant they are and how they can match or even surpass the ability of the humans. But there's something we need to ask ourselves is, GPT has this kind of like, almost like a black box, okay? We have this input and we got this performance as the output. But what's actually inside this black box? Inside, how does GPT process information? How does GPT analyze those information and to generate a final product? This is something we still have not had a very good understanding at this moment, and research, I would say, is very limited and quite scarce. So our study tried to do, we want to provide a glimpse inside this black box, try to understand the GPT and in general, like the large language model, their information processing mechanisms. And we try to connect those mechanisms to their performance. We want to do a realistic task. We want to treat GPT as real-world sell-side analyst. So we feed GPT with both the actual earnings press release without any alteration or anonymization. And we also, same time, also feed the GPT with full-blown financial statements from the past quarters and things. And so both textual and numerical, we feed all this information in that. And we ask the model to produce a numerical earnings forecast. So here, we really want this to act as analysts, to give us the numbers, not just necessarily the directions, okay? To do that, we want to highlight, emphasize three crucial dimensions in understanding these mechanisms. First one is what we call the information prioritization, the texture side. Let's say when you present the GPT with a document, where is it going to focus on? And theoretically, we know that the transformer model, if you read the original Vaswani's paper, and you can find that the big advantage of this transformer model over the previous model is the following, because the previous model, they're more like a sequential model. In a sense, you're going to process a document step by step in sequence. But transformer, it's totally different animal here because it takes a holistic approach. Say I present this model with this full document, it's going to process the entire thing. So it processes all content equally without any innate preference to that. But of course, during the training, when you have the real products like GPT, because there's a lot of human inputs in that, GPT can, they could acquire some tendency while training. Maybe, in the process, they learn from human, they learn, I need to focus on this type of information versus the other. So this is going to deviate from the theoretical design. Okay. Second one is analytical metric choice, which is more about numerical. When you ask GPT to forecast earnings, forecast future returns, and always have to keep in mind, those models, they're actually developed not for those numerical tasks. They're actually primarily designed for textual tasks. So if this is the case, if this is not like the primary focus of large language model, then how well they can perform? And in our task specifically, how can GPT, they can choose the ratios, choose the trends, and choose all the calculation as interim step for the quantitative reasoning. So that's something we want to care about. And the third one, which I also think is very, very important, is about the knowledge cutoff the model. For knowledge cutoff, it basically means when is the last day we finish training the knowledge. Like for example, the GPT-4, the GPT-4 Turbo, their cutoff is in April 2023. So there's two things actually already inside the model. First is the data. Because this train of large amount of data, this is a very easy to understand. They can understand what happened until the knowledge cutoff. But there's another important layer here is the methods. Why? Because up till 2023, there's a lot of new technology, new analytical tools, new analytical methods already developed in the past few years, okay? So it's important to keep this in prospects when you apply the GPT model back to the historical data. To take analogy, it's almost like this. The other day, my son is currently in the fifth grade. He gave me some kind of like, just asked me to help him with homework. And then when I pick up his homework in the 5th grade, they're just still learning those fractions and try to calculate, just to percentage and things, and which really hard for him at the beginning. From my perspective, even if I never seen those questions, those mathematical questions, and those questions like new information to me, new data, because I can't remember I did those things, the exact question. But look, I'm already after many, many years of education, I understand those things inside and out. I understand the analytical approach. So I can understand those questions, solve those questions easily, but not for a 5th grader. It's the same reason here. So first thing, if we want to focus on, pay attention to knowledge cutoff, 2 points. First, does GPT, when they process the pre-cutoff data, do they really process that? Or they simply kind of like regurgitate their stored knowledge? Okay, so this is an important empirical question we need to understand here. Okay, because if you simply regurgitate your stored information, just give out what you in your memory, then you should perform at least as good as those human analysts or things, because that's in your database, right? Another thing is we have to pay attention to any hindsight bias in using those pre-cut performance. As I just said, that even anonymized data or standardized data still going to leave those subtle cues. Those subtle cues is going to give the source or the food for the GPT, because we know GPT is developed to detect those subtle cues, because they're really good, because they take this holistic approach to look at everything together, try to connect those dots. So even the tiniest little subtle cues, GPT can still be pretty efficient to detect. And also any retrospectively application of modern day analytical method to historical data can always causing some concerns. So we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and understand this. There's a limitation here, and also give the knowledge cutoff a serious consideration in the design. Okay. So getting back to our study, for information prioritization, what we exactly do, we ask the GPT to identify inside this press release which sentence, what are the top 3 sentences that's relevant for its forecasting task. And we ask GPT to explain. You have to confirm and explain to us, give us the rationale why you think these 3 sentences are relevant. Okay, this is the first thing. Getting to the analytical metric choice, we ask the GPT to show detailed quantitative analysis it conducted to reach its final forecast. And also ask the GPT to identify 3 key ratios for its quantitative reasoning. Have you used like a current ratio? Have you calculated the sales growth ratio, like the trend? Have you looked at the gross profit margin or anything? Like what kind of ratio you use and why you think that's important? And regarding the knowledge cutoff, we try to compare GPT performance with analyst performance in both pre and post cutoff period. Okay. So our research question 2, first, which part of the disclosure, especially the press release, do GPT prioritize? And do GPT generated earnings forecast outperform those of human analysts? And the sub-question of this is, how do GPT's information prioritization and analytical metric choice influence its performance? First, getting to addressing those questions, I want to provide a brief comparison of human versus large language models. If you think about human analyst has broad knowledge, especially like they're industry experts, so have the industry knowledge. And also, regardless, we have the Reg FD in place, there's still private access to management. This is something we can't avoid. However, they're human. human always have this limited attention and limited capacities, right? And also, the literature tells us human analysts, they may have incentive to distort their forecast. They may issue optimistic forecasts to try to keep their fame and keep their access to managers to cater in this quid pro quo kind of, relationship. Then if you look at like the machine, like large language models, their advantage is they have a huge set of information from the historical data, and they have a superior ability to understand text than human. And of course, their machines, no one's going to bribe them, so they have no incentive issues or under any pressure to issue biased forecast. However, at the same time, after the knowledge cutoff, they have no access to private information, of course, and they have limited access to new information because it's have to happen before the cutoff. And they only access the information you feed them, and that's it. And of course, they're not primarily trained to perform this numerical task. And if you think about human analysts, they're processing. Because human... I'm sorry, is a question or? Okay, yeah, I'll move on. Yeah, make sure you just, if you have questions, feel free to jump in, yeah. For a human analyst, they have limited attention and capacity. So when they process a document, they tend to focus on the quantitative than qualitative because, that's easier to process. And they try to avoid long and complex sentence. They like short and readable sentence, right? And they pay attention to early content because early is the first you set your eyes on rather than the very end one, the very late ones. And probably humans also love good news. So they probably prefer the positive rather than the negative content. And of course, humans have this optimistic, bias, which is widely documented before. If you look at the large language model, theoretically, they shouldn't have those cognitive bias. They shouldn't have this preference for quant versus quali. They should have this complex versus a simple text because these models actually designed to overcome those limitations. So probably they're more likely to prefer those complex models, complex sentence, longer or less readable because that's their stronghold versus human. And order, we know that from the Vaswani's theory, they shouldn't have any preference for order. Positive versus negative, this is something also ex ante, we shouldn't believe they have this type of preference. They should not subject to similar optimism, and are they going to give higher or lower forecast error? This is something up to empirical analysis because they have pros and cons, and it's very hard to tell ex ante whether they're better than human or worse than human in terms of performance. So to give you a preview of the analysis, this is what we have done, okay? We draw from the universe of US firms, 1,000 random firms. And we focused on the 2-year period surrounding the GPT-4 Turbo's knowledge cutoff date, which is April 30th, 2023. So we look at 4 quarters before and 4 quarters after. And out of this, we find almost like a 7,000 earnings press release from those random selected firms. So that's our full sample. Then we feed the GPT-4 Turbo API with the full press release and recent financial statements, which include income statement, the current quarter, quarter before, and 2 quarters before. And we feed the balance sheet, this current quarter and the last quarter. So this is a typical, just a press release presentation. They're going to give you this type of information. Yeah. We asked GPT, like which sentence you pick. And we examine out, within a press release, there are many, many sentences. like which of the top 3 sentences you pick, and what are the linguistic properties of the chosen ones, okay? And we also asked GPT to give us what are the top 3 ratio and trend you calculate in the interim for your earnings forecast. And we compare those ratios with what analysts have done in their interim, because I'm going to talk about a little bit later how we did this empirically. And we compare the GPT-generated Q+1 forecast of earning with consensus analyst forecast. We calculate forecast errors, which is bias, FE, like your forecast minus the actual value, and this is the divided by, deflated by price. And absolute value of this forecast error or bias, we call that forecast accuracy. So this is consistent with the literature. I want to first give you a preview of the key findings we have. Okay. This is what we find. We find GPT-4 exhibits superior potential in prioritizing longer negative tone sentence. So just remember when we talk about that, humans normally they don't like a longer, or they don't like just a complex sentence. But GPT they actually did. They actually prefer longer sentence, and human probably prefer positive tone things, but GPT actually prefer the negative tone sentences. Maybe the negative tones contain more information. That's one possibility. However, we find that GPT-4 also show tendency like human, because they prefer sentence early in the order. They prefer sentence that's more readable, which means they have low, like a fog index or bog index, okay? And they prefer sentence that contain more numerical contents. If there are more numbers in the sentence, that's the thing they're going to focus on. And also, they love sentence which is have a forward-looking information, including guidance. So these are, pretty much like a human preference. And also we find these information prioritization patterns as very robust. We try to divide the firms into different types of information environment, including big firm versus a small firm, with more analyst following versus high analyst following, low analyst following, high institution ownership, low institution ownership. We find these patterns almost like it's fixed. Like we find significance everywhere. And also this prioritization pattern is robust across the knowledge cutoff. Before the cutoff and the post cutoff is the same. Okay? So we believe this is a strong tendency actually embedded by the model. And this could be the work of the training with the human data and the human input. Okay? And when we compare the GPT performance with their human counterpart, like analyst, we find something really interesting. We find that GPT exhibits a very similar level of optimistic bias. So this is quite surprising because GPT is not supposed to be biased, or they shouldn't have this kind of optimism as the human analyst is, but they do. But on top of that, we find that although the bias is similar, but GPT's performance is actually just inferior to human because they exhibit a significantly lower accuracy as compared to human analysts. They underperform human analysts in their accuracy. And this actually happened in both pre and post cutoff period. If you just recall, I just mentioned a little bit when we discussed about the knowledge cutoff. If you think about the pre-cutoff period, the thing GPT can do, they can just purely regurgitate. They can just throw out what's stored in their database, right? So probably the worst they can do is just as good as analysts. But unfortunately, we find the results that they actually perform worse than analysts, even in the pre-period, which we believe this is a strong evidence against, this is kind of like, just a common belief that GPT simply regurgitate what you feed him and just simply give out what's stored. And GPT really, really engage in genuine processing, even in the pre-period. Okay. And we find this GPT to analysts accuracy gap is widened when GPT-picked sentences are incrementally. Let me explain to you what I mean are incrementally. If you look at a press release, it can have all general characteristics like how readable it is and how much negative tone is and how much of the numerical contents or forward-looking contents you have for the general press release on average. But of course, GPT pick up 3 sentences. Those 3 sentences can have some characteristic incremental to the general press release. So we find that if you consider those incremental traits, incremental characteristics, the GPT's underperformance is actually worse when their picked sentences are less readable, when they contain more negative tone contents, and then will have less numerical content, and will have less guidance or other forward-looking information. So in this way, we link the GPT's information prioritization to its final performance to try to understand this underlying mechanism. And we also find that this underperformance actually worsens after the knowledge cutoff. And if I remember correctly, if you put a number, the magnitude is almost like the gap between GTP versus analysts forecast accuracy. The gap actually widens by almost like 25 to 30%, that level. So this really gives us some chill in the sense that if we want to evaluate the GPT performance, we probably really have to look at the post-cutoff performance, because that's where you have the truly innovative and the new data rather than some of the old data, because as said before, they either could be contaminated by the data or they can be contaminated by the methods, which is developed later. Okay.
Dear Professor Edward?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Edward. Hi. Thank you for the presentation. Really fascinating stuff. I just have a question in mind that do you find your conclusions limited to the model you are using? Because I realize, because I noticed that you are using 4, which is not supposed to have really strong reasoning ability, right? As ChatGPT developed the model more, for example, with the releasement of 4.0 and this 0.1, they claim that they have improved their reasoning capacity. So do you think this new development in models would change the conclusions you make?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Alice. Definitely. I think you're just right on the target here. The reason we choose this GPT-4 Turbo is more for kind of design purpose, because we need to have a reasonable sample, like a post cutoff. But the new models, we just released early this year, and we don't have enough. Okay, so that's I would say this is probably a cheap answer to your question. The more fundamental part, we view this like following. We actually have been surprised by the results quite a lot, even from researcher perspective. And like some of the results, just to show you, the thing is, we feel like it's almost like we're dealing with a human being inside this model, because they learn a lot from this human corpus. They have the sort of like human preference, human tendency, and human bias inside. So unless OpenAI and also the other developers, they really take those bias into consideration to try to unwind that. And I believe probably those bias and the tendencies still going to exist in even the newest model. And I don't know to what extent they can fine tune that. And this is actually probably open a huge opportunity for the others, developers, to try to come up with a model which is going to get the human influence out of that. But it's very hard because they train based on human-generated corpus. And unless you're going to simulate, yeah. So our perspective is that we just try to, give a little bit kind of like a warning here to the folks out there, saying that even if they're sophisticated, but they still have a human influence. So when you look at that, when you use that, especially for some high stakes financial tasks and things, keep this in mind. Even the newest models, maybe after 2 years, when we got more cumulative data, so we can use the same method and methodology just to test there. And hopefully they're going to perform better than what the GPT-4 Turbo.
That makes sense. Thank you for addressing this question. I just have it in mind that have you used the chain of thought prompts? Do you think by using chain of thought prompts that you direct GPT a bit can alter the conclusions?
Yeah, actually the currently prompt we use is the COT, the train of thoughts kind of prompt. We actually, later I'm going to show you, we actually have 3 steps kind of method, like one by one, because we asked the GPT first, tell us what kind of sentence, like what's your information prioritization strategy. Second, how you can conduct this quantitative reasoning to give the full earnings forecast. Show us literally step by step how you did. Show us the behind the curtain calculation, what ratio and what trends you calculate, give it its number and how this is going to link to your final forecast. So we really did this step by step. And to be honest, originally our first job when come out, we basically did this like not using the train of thought. The performance is worse than what we did here. We find the GPT performance is better than we use a single prompt, but still not as the level as human analysts been able to perform. So that's what we find. Yeah, great question.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. When we look at the GPT to analyst accuracy gap, we find this gap actually narrows on firm with a better information environment, like larger firms, their gap is actually lower. We believe this is probably due to GPT's reliance on this huge public data, because when you have better information environment, you have all the analysts, you have analyst report, news medias, and all these things. Those are more available. So you can train better. However, for those small firms, maybe analysts, they have better access to the manager, they have more private insight, maybe they're local, they have this or that type of connections, and they're simply being the industry expert. So if we believe this result alliance with that argument. And we also find that GPT to analyst accuracy gap narrows when GPT pick the analytical metric aligned with those analysts. Like when we compare the metrics GPT calculate versus what analysts calculated. And if they're kind of like pound by pound, they just match each other, then we find that the GPT to analyst accuracy gap narrows, which is makes sense because the more you follow the analyst approach, of course, you're just going to reach the same results as those analysts. So this is another, we find this interesting and intuitive results. Overall, we find GPT-4 shows a great potential for tasks of a sell-side analyst, but there are still some significant limitations here. To put this in OpenAI's own words, and this is, I just find this the other day. If you go to this website, just on OpenAI 2024, their index, GPT-4 research, they have this quote: despite its capacities, GPT-4 has similar limitations as early GPT models. Most importantly, it still is not fully reliable. Great care should be taken when using language model outputs, particularly in high-stakes contexts. Okay. Adarsh, please.
Hi, Professor Edward. Really fascinating presentation. I had a question that, am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so like, as you said, like as the GPT or the model proceeds to more in the work that we assign the GPT, it aligns more with the human analyst, then the performance it gets better. But don't you think like there's a way out to this, like with the more agentic approaches coming nowadays, we can have like not just one solo analyst, LLM, GPT analyst, but a bunch of analysts, AI agents that can do the job, and we can achieve greater performance. So don't you think that as transformers also just pick attention to just one topic, let's say, there's with the self-attention mechanism. So don't you think that isn't really fair with the GPT to expect that level of giving attention to so many metrics or parameters?
Yeah, so helping understand your question a little bit better. So you say that if we have multiple the large language
Agents, let's say.
agents,
Yes.
and we try to do them like a joint force to give a more I would say almost like a crowdsourced kind of solution. Is that you try to get to? Maybe this is going to significantly improve their performance rather than only focused on GPT only. Is that what you try to get?
Right. I'm just brainstorming. Like, would you think that that would increase the performance even better?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a brilliant thought, because we learned that from human. We learned that from human because there's the crowdsourced solution. A lot of time they're actually better or even outperform like a single analyst or a single decision maker. If we have GPT, we have Genesis, and we have just Perplex and all this together. And if we have, let's say, we build a sort of like a large language models consensus, maybe those consensus could perform better than the GPT. That's highly likely because different models can have a different focus and they have some kind of like a variation, almost like where we focused on not just on single analysts, we focused on the analyst consensus. So I think that's definitely something worth exploring and worth doing. And on top of that, I feel like if you just have a GPT, pool those machines with human, maybe the consensus, like a human and machine consensus, potentially is going to beat both of them. That's something, definitely some possibility here. Okay, I really see a potential here. Yes. Thanks for the insight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. But of course, before getting to that step, we still have to understand what's the underlying mechanism, like what drives its underperformance, what potentially going to improve this performance by maybe we can tweak its information prioritization choice. We can tweak its analytical matrix method towards the way that can help us, or maybe that's my hope to someday they can, just at least perform on par with analysts. But still, to my perspective, I still believe that, human analysts, they still provide a huge, huge value in our economy. It's very hard to replace those sell-side analysts. They have their insights, they have their intelligence, and they can see some strategical for, I would say, like a fundamental change, maybe GPT models or the other large language models cannot see. So I'm a strong advocate for keeping this sell-side analyst, this industry in our financial world. Let me see. I have another question in the chat here. Let me just hear. I think Alice has a question follow up on the consensus stuff. Do you think fine-tune GPT with professional support can improve the performance? I would say probably can go either way. Of course, when you have professional analysts helping the GPT to fine-tune its performance, can move it more towards better performance. But also at the same time, analysts also have their bias or also have their limitation, which is also going to be impounded into those models. So I still believe this may be an empirical question. I really hope that some analysts' input can improve this model. Yeah, that's my hope. I think Ahmed has a question. Do you see whether GPT is harmful to human? How many jobs it were affected? How we can generate new jobs for using GPT? Oh, I think this is almost like you're asking for someone running for the public office. I'm not running for senators or Congress here, but this is my prospect. When the time internet was first coming to, I remember it's 1990s and early 1990s and things, and people have the same question. Like, would those internet be harmful to human? They're going to replace job, and how this going to generate new job for using the internet? And we have the answer nowadays by looking retrospectively, right? Internet actually significantly improve our efficiency. Of course, they get rid of many of the jobs we previously had, but also they create a lot of new jobs. Now we have more people sitting in an office, sitting in front of a computer, doing job than previously. For GPT here, I feel like it probably can have the same type of revolution in our job market. One example I can give you is like the follows. Because I'm an accounting professor, the thing most relevant is like a Big Four firm, like those Big Four accounting firm. Nowadays, they use a lot of those large language models, GPT and all the others, to process the initial documents. So they don't need to have a human to do those, I would say, tedious work or arduous work. They leave those humans more for decision makings. And that's the same. The other day when I met our partner, like audit partner from our local, like New York office, and what his point is like this. Now, we don't need a school to train accountant to do the simple bookkeeping stuff, because a lot of those verification job, confirmation jobs can easily be done by GPT and the other products. We want a decision maker. We want someone who can really utilize those GPT as a tool. So that's what we do currently in Baruch, our accounting class. We try to integrate the GPT learning through our education system. For example, like writing a report. At the beginning, people think, oh, we should stop assigning any of us essay question to students because they can use GPT to generate that. But the thing is, students are smart, they really did. But you can easily tell, oh, this is not something human can create it, or this is not a student at that level can create. This must be created by the GPT or some kind of like other products and things. So what we do is we ask the students when they just write an essay, write a report and things, they first feed it to GPT and let GPT to generate a report for them. Then the student's job is to say, I'm going to criticize this report. I'm going to, based on this report as some kind of like template, I'm going to revise and improve on that. And after you improve, feed to GPT again, and then you kind of refine on top of what GPT. So our students now have to understand how to use GPT as a tool to get a better quality output rather than simply rely on GPT. And I feel like this is probably going to apply to many walks or many industry. And GPT now become one of stuff in your toolbox, but it's not going to completely replace your job. Okay, even let me tell you, even if some job people feel like is easily replaced, like a copy editing. Okay, tell you this, one of my copy editor I used for the last 10 years or so, she still has a backlog up to 2 months of time. Like whenever I asked her, oh, can you just take rid of these things from me? And she said, oh, I'm sorry, you have to, I don't have time for the next 8 weeks or something. So human input here, especially the best copy editors, they still have their job available because they understand what you really want to get to, what really want to accomplish. This is something not the general like a GPT products or large language model will be able to help. So we have to stand on top of this new tool and really add our human intelligence, human input in that. Okay, yeah. So I hope this answers Aman's question, and let me just go back to my presentation here. Oops. Okay, here I want to show you one example, like our interaction with the GPT-4 Turbo API. This is one company called Signbone, CI code 149. This is from March 31st, 2023, and the RQE, which is the earnings announcement day, is May 3rd. And this is company's press release, and you can see this is of all the full press release the company have. And on top of that, this is something we feed to the API, the full blown press release with all the identification. We also give the financial statements, like the balance sheet. This is the current quarter versus last quarter. And we have also the income statement from the current quarter and 2 quarters ahead of that previously. So we feed GPT both qualitative and quantitative. And we take this the COT method, train of thoughts, prompts. In the step number 1, we ask GPT go to analyze the press release and identify the key sentence and explain their relevance. So this is what a GPT tells us. First sentence is annual guidance increase to 128 million, implying annual growth of 20 to 23%. And if you look at the explanation, they said the increase in annual guidance suggests the company expects continued revenue growth, which can lead to higher earnings and potentially a higher EPS in future quarters. And if you look at the other 2 sentences, they all are very, very relevant, and GPT actually have pretty reasonable explanation why they picked that. Okay. In step number 2, we asked GPT to conduct a financial ratio and a trend analysis. We didn't prescribe like what analysis you should do. We want to give the latitude to GPT. So this is what GPT selected. We did say that GPT calculated revenue growth rate, gross margin percentage, and operating expense ratio. So it actually gives us the numbers, like what they calculate behind the curtain, and also tell us why they choose this. They choose the revenue growth rate because the ratio is important to show how quickly the company's sales are increasing, which is direct driver of EPS. Okay. Then in step number 3, we asked GPT to predict earnings, the GAAP earnings. And we actually asked it to do 2 things. One is tell us the direction of change, because we also want to compare to some other contemporaneous work we have. But more importantly, we want to get the actual number, the EPS values here, okay? So the EPS value to actually give the calculation and estimated net income, estimated net EPS, like net income divided by number of common shares outstanding. This negative 31 cents is the number to give us. And also we asked the GPT what's the certain, like a confidential score, and they give us like 70% of confidential in its prediction. So this is a task. Getting back to our sample, we start from the 8 quarters surrounding the knowledge cutoff. And we try to get all the earnings press release content, the full text release, okay? And we draw 1,000 firms that have at least 1 quarter before and 1 quarter after cutoff. So leading us to 7,400 observation. Out of 7,200 observation, we feed it to the API. There are about like 243 API didn't give any output. But fortunately, we got another almost like 7,000 out of this. And based on this 6957, in the press release, the total number of sentences is 324,000 unique sentence we can look at. Now let's look at the result one by one. First is the GPT information prioritization. This is the descriptive statistic, and you can see first one is our dependent variable, is like whether the sentence is picked by GPT. So you can see this about like 6.1% of chance you got picked by the GPT. Okay. Sentence order, this basically, you know, this mean value, median value is like around to 50%. So what basically we do is like if you're early in the press release, you got low number, 0, almost 0 point something. And by the end, this reached 100%. That's like 1. Sentence length, sentence fog, which is the readability, sentence numerical, like what percentage of sentence has numbers, numerical content. Then we also look at the sentiment. We use the Bird to classify the sentiment content of each sentence, like which words and which contents suggest a positive versus negative, and whether the sentence including guidance, like forward-looking information. And we, of course, we have firm size, analyst, institution for information environment. Okay. This is graph we draw basically to show you this is a sentence picked by the GPT right here. And this is the sentence order. Like this part you can consider to be the early part of the press release. This is the end part of press release. You can see clearly GPT picked more, much more sentence early on. Okay. And this is a regression model. We try to figure out what's the information prioritization. This is what we find. I want to draw a focus, and because the significance are very consistent, I want to draw your conference especially to the second column here, because second column is probably the most rigorous design in the sense that we use the press release fixed effect. So this is within each press release, what kind of contents you're going to prioritize. We find that GPT prefer early content, early sentence. They want sentence that's longer, okay? And they want sentence that's less foggy, so which means they prefer easy to read content, like almost like human. They want a sentence that contain more numerical information. And they also want sentence that's more negative. And I guess maybe one of the reasons because they believe negative contain more information. That's a possibility because, you know, negative ones, you know, for manager, for firm to really admit they have some kind of like a negative news, which means that they really have something going on here. So maybe that's a focus, which will be beneficial. Of course, they focus on guidance, any forward-looking information. And this tendency is consistent both pre and post cutoff. And also, we tried all sorts of different, you know, cutting the sample. And this pattern, it's very, very robust. Okay, so we believe this just being a testify of some innate property or tendency embedded in the model from training. Okay. And this is, we try to differentiate the information prioritization by the information environment. So what we do here is the follows. If you look at the first column here, we try to create dummy based on firm size, like big firm, small firm, okay? So we interact that dummy, like a small firm dummy, with all these characteristics. And we find that if you look at here, this significant just means that the smaller the firm is, the more likely GPT is going to focus on the long sentence. Maybe the long sentence that believe they contain more information or something. That's our guess. And also they're going to focus more on the negative news. Maybe the small firms, they are not so forthcoming with their disclosure. They're not that much transparent. So whenever they disclose some bad news, GPT is going to focus more on that. Of course, when you're a small firm, they focus more on your self-provided guidance. And you can see this is actually pretty consistent among all the 3 cutoff, which I believe GPT really has some underlying mechanism try to make up for the lack of publicly available information to focus on some meaningful or more informative content. And this actually go back to its training based on large crops. When you have a small firm with worse information environment, you probably don't have enough training data stored in your database. Okay. And this is actually just a word cloud for the justification. This is the word cloud in all the picked sentence the GPT have, and you can see clearly it focused on revenue, focused on growth, focused on net, business, income, sales, guidance. Very, very consistent with it's really doing something that's we wanted to do. Okay. Next, let's look at the GPT's analytical metric choice. Okay. And as I said before, we want GPT to tell us what are the 3 top metrics, like a trend or ratios you calculate for your task as interim step. And this is what we find. This is actually the top 20 metrics GPT actually give us. Of course, net profit margin is the highest one, almost like 76.5% of the time they produce this number. ROE, 55.6%. Earnings per share, I mean, of course, earnings per share, you have to generate it. Current ratio, debt to equity ratio, gross margin, revenue growth. And there's also something interesting. They also create something like a net interest margin, burn rate, R&D expense trend, loan grace rate. So you can see GPT is actually have a huge variation behind the curtain in how it's going to approach the task of generate next quarter's forecast. So it's not like a single set. So GPT has huge variation inside it. So which make this examination really interesting. Okay. Then what we do is we compare GPT's metric and compare it to the analysts. And we try to find to what extent it's aligned with analysts. Okay. Because IBES also provide various metrics that analysts provide a forecast. These include like SAL, like sales, gross margin, ROE, ROA, and etc. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the IBES database. You know these are the forecasts they give besides EPS. We want to see to what extent you have match between the GPT-used metrics versus the IBES provided metrics. The higher the metrics match they are, the better. Of course, we asked GPT to give us a 3. So if all 3 matches, we give a code like a 3. If 2 matches, 2. If only 1, 1. If none of the 3 is 0. And this is our descriptive statistic. We find that GPT analyst overlap is 1.83. So shows a very, very high alliance. And the median is 2. But of course, we still have the lower quartile only 1 and higher quartile of 2. So there's a huge variation. Okay. Finally, let's look at GPT versus analyst forecast performance. Let me show you the overall forecast bias, the arrow, which is the directional bias. And we find that the GPT forecast arrow bias is 0.00. It's just like a 0.4%. And note this, we use the GPT forecast minus the actual earnings deflated by the price. And I can tell you this number is actually significantly positive, which is very consistent and comparable to even in the magnitude, because analysts is 0.005 on average. So in general, GPT and analysts, they're almost like indistinguishable in terms of forecast arrow, and both of them exhibit those upward bias. Okay. But the picture are very different when we look at absolute value, when we get into the forecast accuracy side. Here we find that if you take absolute value of the forecast arrow, for GPT, we come to a level like a 4.1% as compared only 2.2% for the analysts. So almost nearly like a double. If you look at the difference in mean and difference in median, they're all significant. So on average, GPT's numerical forecast is, I would say, is worse and underperform the human analyst. Then if we divided them into the pre-cutoff versus post-cutoff, and also we focused on small versus large firms, we find the gap, the accuracy gap, is much larger under the small than for the large firms, which is still very consistent with large firms. They have better information environment. They have more public available corpus for GPT to learn from. So the performance much better than under the small firm case. And small firm case analysts, they may have better manager access or private information or private insight. Okay, and you can see this is pretty consistent both pre and post period. Okay. And if you look at the overall forecast accuracy cut by the fog index of the press release, and you can also find that if the fog index is high, which means the overall press release is less readable, the GPT also perform worse than when this is more readable, which is pretty understandable. Okay. Then if you look at the GPT analytical metric alignment, and you'll find that if the metrics GPT and analysts calculate are similar to each other, like the high alignment, then their difference is smaller. And if it's low, then their difference is much higher than what. And this is a result of kind of like a persist both pre and post period. Now, I want to show you the final regression result. First, let's take a look at the dependent variable is just the difference between these two. We want to focus on this variable, this difference, because the analyst forecast and provide a perfect control for the GPT forecast. If you say there's other kind of like factors or omitted variables in regarding the press release, the numbers, or the contemporaneous market condition or anything, at least if you just compare a difference, it helps you dodge a lot of those issues. Okay. First, let's look at the information prioritization. Here, I want to draw attention first to the press release characteristic, which just means the general, linguistic or properties of this press release. If you look at the second column here, you find that the length, the total length, the average length, average fog, readability, and average numbers, and average sentiment and guidance, they do show some impact on this gap here, the performance gap. But most importantly, we need to focus on the third column because we run a horse race in the sense after control for the overall characteristic of the press release, we focus on the incremental GPT selected sentence. And you'll find that GPT selected sentence, the higher the fog, which means the less readable of those sentences you pick, the worse performance you have. And if you choose a sentence which has got more numbers, your performance becomes better. If the sentiment, if you pick more of those more positive sentence, you also notice that the performance become better, which means that if GPT focus more on the negative toned sentence, it actually doesn't, service performance better because, it's actually make this performance worse. The more focus on the negative side makes the forecast error even larger. So this is what we find. Okay. And if GPT focused on the guidance or forward-looking information, then we find that its performance also getting better because the gap kind of narrow. Then let's look at the analytical metric alignment part. From the regression, we can find that across all three specifications, this is a significant negative, which means that the more aligned the GPT with human analysts in terms of their qualitative reasoning, the better performance GPT is, because this narrow, make this gap narrow. And when we look at the effects of knowledge cutoff, we find that the post period is much higher than the pre-period. And this is actually shows like 0.552. And if you remember previously the number, and this suggests it's about like a 25 to 30%. And I remember exactly, I don't remember exactly the number, maybe that's a 29% of increase in this performance gap here. So once again, it kind of like underscore the importance to really focus on the post cutoff period to assess the performance. Okay. And if you look at the firm characteristic, you'll find that pretty consistent. The larger firm you are, the less smaller the gap is. And here we just control for all the time fixed effect and the industry fixed effect here. So to conclude, our analysis tried to take a peek inside the GPT, this is a black box, and we find the GPT can conduct analysis. Yeah, they really can do that, and they can generate forecasts in sort of like a similar way as human did. And their information prioritization on the textual information, GPT likes early, longer, high readability, and a negative tone sentence. And they also prefer numerical content and also prefer the forward-looking information, just like a human. Regarding analytical metric choices, GPT's choice has a huge variation, but its alignment with analysts really matters for its performance as compared to analysts. And getting to the knowledge cutoff is very crucial for fair model assessment, because the hindsight bias could arise from both data and the modern or newly developed analytical method. And we also find that GPT underperforms versus analyst. And this underperformance is partially explained by GPT's information prioritization, analytical metric choice, and the knowledge cutoff. And when you compare to analysts, the access to public information seems to be really crucial to GPT model, because the more corpus available for it to train itself. So reliance on the model when there is a lack of public information can actually be peril to its accuracy. So if you're going to use GPT or any of the large language model for some high stakes financial tasks or any other task, you should always be extra careful here. Yeah. This is a figure I find actually from the famous Pixar movie, WALL-E. This is the bad guy, but I didn't mean this GPT is a bad guy. Here, I just want to say our study offered the first glimpse inside the GPT's black box. And while GPT showed considerable promise, it also faced limitations and challenges that are inherent to its design. And I hope a future development of GTP models and other models can overcome these, I would say, the innate issues. And of course, as I said, careful considerations warranted in high-stake financial applications. And I want to thank you for the attention, and thank you for the question and comments. And I'm now open for any questions.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Edward Lee, for your contribution and your effort. Thank you very much. It's really an excellent presentation and excellent paper. Now, if anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. Yeah, Hanan.
Yes, hi, Dr. Muhammad. How are you? Thank you for the excellent presentation, Professor. And I have a question about the GPT usage within banking sector or financial technology, fintech. What is the latest usage within this sector?
As far as I understand that, for example, like the loan decision, like you can either is the large bank loans or is like the consumer loans. Now they already started to use large language model, not necessarily GPT, but they start to use those models to assist human decision makers to do those decisions, because GPT can really provide you some help, some insight. But of course, at this moment, I don't believe they can completely replace human analysts. Yeah, that's it. That's what
Yes, I agree with you about no places for humans. But I ask about how can benefit within the banking sector, within the AI technology or GPT as a services introducer.
You mean the actual practice? Like how?
Yes.
Oh, like for example, if you have a GPT, okay, and some applicant say they apply for a personal loan or they apply for a credit card, okay, so they're going to provide you with all sorts of information, and they can fill the application. They also provide those documents to prove they have some collateral or their income. Now you can feed those to the GPT and ask, say, how can you feel about this applicant? Should I approve? What's your confidence level? And what's the red flag here you see? And the GPT can tell you based on its large corpus and say that, oh, these are the following red flags you potentially see, 1, 2, 3. And after you see the sort of flags, you can go back to the clients and ask them, say, oh, can you explain a little bit more about these issues? And of course, they can provide you further documents or provide explanation things. Then you feed to GPT, and that's going to help you through maybe 1 or 2 iterate to make a more informed decision rather than just purely human. Just take a look and say, oh, I need proof, I need not proof. And this is the fine-tuning part. The GPT can really contribute to this process.
Thank you about this answer, but it's within the decision making, as you said before. But I asked about we have it's like I score within our banking expressions in. But I ask about the services within financial technology or fintech with online banking issues.
Yeah, I suppose you're mentioning about those online credit approval decision, right? When someone go online, they apply for a personal loan, they type in their information and upload some documents, like their W-2 or their like a tax return documents, and ask the machine to just process this with the minimum level of human input. Is that what you try to get to, Hannah?
It's the same within the loan providing or like this. I ask about the services with online banking, like I don't know. It's like transfers or any services can I have with online with banking accounts or to have with credit cards or ATMs like this. You have any chat bot within the website of the bank online also. It's like this. You don't have which you mentioned before. It's about credit or loans. We named it as the iScore for customers. But I ask about fintech, financial technology services. It issued from 2011, I think. It's the beginning.
Oh, I suppose you're also talking about like a bank. They provide online customer service.
Yes.
Like when you have the chatbot, which is guide
Yes.
you through this application process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Now I see what you did. Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, nowadays, many of the banks, they offer those 24/7 chatbot online, and they allow you to apply for loan or credit cards and things. So this chatbot really going to guide you, the applicants, through this process, like what kind of information to fill, and those chatbot also going to ask specific questions for those applicants. Because internally, it's going to have a model to try to highlight or red flags if there's an issue, like a potential credit default risk with this applicant. So they really inside that they really have this decision making. They need step by step, almost like how to say this, almost like a COT process, like the chain of thoughts kind of process here. The users like give the prompt, like I want to apply this loan, and this is my proof of resident, proof of income, and proof of this thing or that thing, my employment. Then the chatbot is going to just process the information, and if it sees this everything looks great, then it's going to approve instantaneously. If they see red flags, and they're going to ask back and say, oh, this part, why in the last 6 months you don't have any payroll, you've been unemployed? Can you provide some justification or something for that? If that's the case, you're probably going to provide some proof, and if that passed the threshold, then the chatbot is going to approve. But if not, then worst case, if after several rounds of iteration, the machine believe there's still some red flags that cannot be easily overcome, it will turn to a human teller or human decision maker. Then they can tell the applicant, say, oh, we're going to get back to you in 24 hours or 48 hours or something. Thank you. So that's my belief of what's going on right here.
Masoud?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, great question.
Hello, can I ask my question?
Oh yeah, please.
Hi, the name is Masoud, and I'm from the UK. I show on the screen as SBUSMM2, so that's not a name. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just want to start with a quick question, just for you to check that my understanding is correct. My understanding of what you presented is you start from the published information, for like information published by the companies, and then you look at to what extent AI can make an analysis of that data, right?
Yep.
Right. So, isn't there an assumption that what the companies, or what you call corporations in the US, have published truthful information? And that leads me to my interest in what I want to know. I want to ask about your thoughts about how, or to what extent, companies may have already started using AI to actually produce the annual reports, including the financial statements. So I don't want to start from the end. I don't want to start from the data that they have released and believe that it is true and it gives a true picture, and I just need to analyze it and make forecasts, EPS and all the investment indicators and so on. I just want to know whether there is any trend to show that companies are actually producing their annual reports, using AI tools, on the assumption that will make them more compliant, let's say, with financial reporting. You will have less inquiries by bodies like the SEC because you have more accurate reporting. So that is more or less what I've been thinking about.
Oh yeah, excellent. I think your question actually touched two parts. Let me just expand this, answer this one by one. First, about the AI-generated corporate disclosure. There's actually a recent paper, Blank Spore et al. They actually used GPT to examine firms' 10K or 10Q, those annual report or quarter report, to see what proportion of those reports are actually written by large language models. And actually, they find some interesting result there. So your insights right on target. Some firm that really start to use this large language model to write, to just produce their own report. This trend I've seen, based on my understanding, that actually started from not now. It's actually from many years ago when the SEC started to ask firm to provide XBRL. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the XBRL. It's like you have to tag all the numbers and things using those the HTML kind of tag or XML tag. At that time, many firms already outsource its 10K, 10Q reports to a specific company who can automate everything by tagging those earnings numbers, tagging those income numbers, balance sheet numbers, and everything using a program to tag that. So you can see, at least from that time onward, there's already many parts of a firm's financial statements. Firm's financial disclosure is already machine products. So that's definitely something people are going to push the boundary over and over to more advanced ways. As initially said, that they try to do something to minimize their risk. Yeah, of course, that's something they try to do, because any disclosure was subject to the anti-fraud litigation and also any SEC or DOJ enforcement actions. So it's very important for them to be very careful about what words to put in the disclosure. So using the machine to generate those is going to be initial start. But of course, and as far as I know, most of companies, before they finally release their 10K, 10Qs, they need to have a human, need to have their lawyers read this a couple of times, not just one lawyer, maybe a couple of lawyers, try to finally screen everything. They can't simply say, oh, this is what the GPT generated, I'm going to publish that. No, that's not the case. Then the second point you raised about is about the potential misreporting or financial fraud. Say, this is my performance, I want to garnish it, make it look better. But to some extent, I'll push it to the boundary, even fraudulence. This is a very important thing to brought up, in the sense, in the past 10 or 20 years or even longer, the financial industry has developed many tools to try to detect those financial fraud after the Enron case. So you can see there are different models, there are different detection of tripwires available there. And those tripwires nowadays, I believe it's embedded in GPT, because they actually trained on this large corps from the past. So GPT, I believe, then can, to some extent, decipher any of the building bias or building any optimism or any misreporting. So this is something definitely worth pursuing, definitely worth doing. But I believe the GTP actually has the ability to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. So that means that auditors now will have a much more challenging job, don't you think?
You mean
auditor? Yeah.
Auditor, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a mouse cat game, right? You have the cat being smarter, and you have the mouse being smarter. Then who's going to win the game? So it's we'll see. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. Yes. Adrash?
Yeah. Hi, Prof. Is there any other current research projects interesting hypothesis you're testing with GPTs, LLMs that you want to share?
Oh, Yeah, there's a couple of things where me and my co-author are thinking at this moment. We don't have specific thing to share this moment because it's still in action. We want to share this one because we feel this in a stage that's ready to be shared. We don't want to have some kind of half-baked products, kind of like
Right.
confusing people. Yeah. But this one, we feel it's a quite important message we want to deliver to the outside when.
Right. So, but as you said, like questioning the black box. So with this paper, you said like there were many things you touched upon, like the sentence, positioning of the sentence, and the length of the sentence, and many more things. But any more things that you think that are uncharted right now?
You can see this is only a very, very specific task, like analysts based on earnings press release to generate a forecast. You can have other agent like, I remember Alan just mentioned things about what if the bank or financial institute, their banking decision, like how to calculate or how to assess the default risk. This is something we also can look at. And also other potential player here, like, just investors, just pure investor institutions. How to make an investment decision. We have this portfolio formation, and we have this or that type of factors to consider. Which one we should take? So there's a lot of things we can go one step further. Instead of simply say, oh, GPT, tell me what to do. We have to ask GPT, give me the reason behind your decision. And I think that's a very important step we need to do to really hold the GPT and all the large language models accountable and trustable. So this is, I would say this is like a general line of research I try to push.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Edward Lee, for your contribution and your effort. Thank you, everyone, joining us today, and thank you very much, dear Professor Edward, for taking the time to present to us today. It's really appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you, Dr. Edward.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope to see you soon in Egypt. You are very, very welcome.
Yeah, I will try. Yeah.
Yeah.